Here are just a few more descriptors for language, so that we have some more tools in our own toolbox to try and talk about the language that we use, and also get an idea for this assignment that we're working on. These will show up in quiz questions, yes, test questions, but also in the very assignment that you're writing on. We've already talked about, for example, vague words. They're really the opposite of concrete, specific, clear, and sensory words. Vague words are a little bit of the enemy here, or if they are useful, they're only useful as they lead us to better language or more precise language. They're different from ambiguous words. Ambiguous words might convey more than one meaning. Context is really required here. We've seen ambiguous words just simply in reading and trying to make sense of Malcolm X. He describes his homemade education. He talks about new vistas opening before him. And finally, he really makes quite a big deal about talking about his reading leaving him truly free. He never felt so truly free in his life, he says. The word freedom, of course, can mean many different things for him, but they don't mean that he can go out of the prison and wander around as a free man. Ambiguous words are good in some sense because they can convey multiple meanings at once. They're not necessarily vague. Vague is a negative thing. Ambiguous could just mean, gosh, we delight in the different meanings of the word that could be conveyed in especially a personalized definition. Abstract words are not vague words. They're not bad either. They just require context. We usually can't point to them or touch them. They're not tangible in that way. Abstract words are different from vague because they are given some context and definition by the very lives or by the very readings that we have. They can include things like justice or health, as we referred to in an earlier part of the video. They're ones where we have to really attach them to some specifics in order to really understand them. Sometimes we spend our life trying to understand them, frankly. There are not only grown-up adults, but people who are living on into their elderly years, still trying to work out ideas for fairness and justice. I won't go into more detail about that, but those are abstract words which they will live out their lives trying to define. Now some other kinds of words, and words more related to some business here. These next two. Jargon is technical language specific to a job. Sometimes can be very stipulative, that the company agrees to it, but I don't know it. It can be helpful. Sometimes it can prevent meaning from being understood. It's usually not in college dictionaries. It's jargony if it relates only to your business and no place else, and another kind of reader wouldn't understand unless you explained it. Buzzwords are trendy, faddish words. And there's lots of them each year. I'll probably have pointed out in class different kinds of buzzwords that are popular now. I like to avoid them because I'm not quite sure what they mean. My daughter used the word sketchy, but to her that can mean not just ambiguous meanings, but it seems to change actually quite frequently, and in a few years it'll maybe be gone. A couple of years ago it might have been cool as a word. I don't know if she uses that anymore. Buzzwords are trendy words. They'll come and go. They're a little bit like slangy words. One hopes that the best ones will stick around, because as you have heard me say in class, all language was at different times slang or new language. Then finally, euphemisms are prettied up problem ideas, such as not revealing that we're talking about death. Sometimes we'll talk about someone passing on or someone kicking the bucket. It isn't just political correctness that makes us pretty up the language. We sometimes have difficulty with language itself, especially when it deals with a problematic subject. We don't like talking about someone who's insane, but we talk about them as what? A few cards short of a full deck, a few nuggets short of a Happy Meal. Their elevator might not go to the top floor. Or if you're in an Irish culture, sometimes they'll say someone is not insane but touched, which is an interesting euphemism for that prettied up idea. You can probably think of your own euphemism for a problem subject. If someone's fat, do we call them fat? If someone's short, do we call them short? My old college roommate was blind. He didn't like it when people called him visually impaired or even handy-capable. He actually got offended at that. He said, I am blind, and that's what I am. Euphemism itself is a word that's old. It's Greek. It is attendant on the culture and the language because it's part of human nature. We've always tried to do this, to pretty up language when sometimes the more blunt language is more precise. It doesn't mean that we ought to have every other word be super blunt and offensive, but it does mean that we ought to avoid avoiding strong or painful meanings. Okay, so vague, abstract, ambiguous, jargon, buzzwords, euphemism, all of these terms, abstract terms as they are now defined for you. You think about them. They're not vague anymore. It's interesting, vague can no longer be described as vague. The point here is you have a list of terms and their definitions. You have some examples which show those terms. And just as with Malcolm X, you prove that there are some things that are worth knowing without having to look them up. Those are things that reside in your brain. You don't have to accommodate them anymore. They're assimilated already, probably through hard years of reading. But if they are accommodated, you've added to them, and you will add to them with more of your own examples. And that is one of the discoveries Malcolm X makes. It's kind of a smaller discovery, but the idea is that you have categories, you have tools to help you take a look at the language that you do pick up. So it's not just one big mass of stuff. And I think that's very valuable. And as with Malcolm X, it will open up new vistas for you.